In the quiet heartland of America, where rows of corn stretch toward the sky, and farming isn't just a job but a way of life, a profound betrayal has taken root. It didn't come in the form of foreign invaders or natural disaster. It came through the halls of Washington, cloaked in patriotic slogans and empty campaign promises. For farmers across the nation, especially those who overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020, the disillusionment has been nothing short of devastating. Donald Trump's message to rural America was clear. You have been forgotten, and I am your voice. He promised to protect American workers, bring back manufacturing, and defend the values of hardworking, overlooked citizens. For farmers, this message hit home. Decades of declining crop prices, shrinking government support, and global trade deals that favored foreign competitors had taken their toll. Trump seemed to understand their pain, and more importantly, he promised to fix it. Rural counties responded with enthusiasm. In states like Iowa, Missouri, and Nebraska, Trump won some farming counties with over 80% of the vote. Farmers hung Trump flags on their barns, tractors, and pickup trucks. It wasn't just a vote, it was an act of hope. They believed they were finally electing someone who would look out for them. But that hope didn't last long. Real quick, if you're into videos that cut through the noise and break things down clearly, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people find this. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your take. Now, on to the video. One of the first signs of trouble came not from a speech or a press conference, but from disappearing contracts, quiet cancellations that began to ripple through the agricultural economy. Farmers who relied on government programs to sell fresh produce to schools, prisons, and federal agencies were suddenly cut off. Long-standing agreements that stabilized income for thousands of family farms vanished overnight. Why? The answer was buried in a document most Americans never read, Project 2025. This comprehensive political plan outlined sweeping changes to nearly every corner of government, including agriculture. It promised efficiency, streamlining, and reducing dependence. But what it really did was dismantle the very programs rural America depended on. Subsidies were slashed, development grants were eliminated, emergency support programs were axed or buried under red tape. Farmers were stunned. This wasn't what they voted for. Nick Lewandowski, the executive director of the Kansas Farmers Union, put it bluntly. There are a lot of people very concerned who voted for this administration, but they wrote it all down in Project 2025. We should have paid closer attention. The irony was cruel. Those who had once felt invisible now realized they had been targeted, not by chance, but by design. What made this betrayal especially painful was how unexpected it was. Trump had campaigned as a champion of rural America, and for many he was a hero. But when the policies rolled out, it became clear that loyalty wasn't enough. Farming communities were sacrificed for political expediency. Agricultural policy was shaped not by those who worked the land, but by ideologues who viewed subsidies and rural development as unnecessary burdens. To deflect criticism, the administration pointed fingers. They blamed the Obama and Bush administrations for crushing agriculture with regulations, for crippling inflation, and for allowing foreign competitors to dominate U.S. markets. But for farmers, these explanations rang hollow. The pain wasn't in the past. It was now. And it was happening under the leadership they had trusted most. The fallout went beyond finances. It shook the very identity of rural voters. These weren't just policy shifts, they were personal betrayals. The tractor in the field, the family-owned silo, the crops harvested at sunrise, all of it now felt uncertain. What once symbolized independence and resilience was now a target in a political war. The rural American dream, once fueled by hard work and national pride, was being redefined. And not by global markets or climate, but by the very government that had promised to protect it. And this was just the beginning. Behind every broken promise lies a cold, unforgiving truth. Numbers don't lie. And the numbers across rural America paint a devastating picture of a system under siege. For many farmers, this wasn't just about political betrayal. It was about watching the arithmetic of their survival spiral into disaster. Over the past 4 decades, America has lost more than 50% of its small farms. These weren't just inefficient operations. Many were multi-generational family farms that had weathered recessions, droughts, and trade wars. But now, under the weight of policy changes and financial pressures, they were finally being pushed off the edge. Let's start with crop prices, the lifeblood of the agricultural economy. Since 2022, corn prices have plummeted 37%. For the average Midwestern farmer whose entire operation might rely on corn to pay off loans, maintain equipment, and feed a family, this wasn't a dip. It was a free fall. Soybeans, down 24%. Wheat, slashed by 35%, even as input costs like fertilizer, fuel, and seed soared. Profit margins disappeared. Farmers who once made slim but sustainable incomes now found themselves deep in the red. This price collapse didn't happen in a vacuum. It coincided with broader economic shifts that hit farmers especially hard. Take the agricultural equipment industry. Since 2015, John Deere has eliminated 4,500 jobs, a move that reflects shrinking demand as farmers delay or cancel equipment upgrades. Why? Because new tractors, once a hopeful investment in the future, now cost more than many farmers' annual revenue. Faced with that reality, many have no choice but to keep old machinery running long past its expiration date, patching and welding just to survive another season. But even more dangerous than falling prices or failing equipment is the credit crunch sweeping across rural America. For decades, agricultural banks were the quiet partners in family farms. They knew the land, the people, the seasons. They extended credit during tough years and celebrated bumper crops alongside their clients. But now those relationships are fraying. As farm losses mount, banks are pulling back. Interest rates on agricultural loans have spiked, turning basic operational costs into insurmountable hurdles. Suddenly, the math has changed. Adapt, consolidate, or disappear. It's no longer enough to be a good farmer. You need to be a savvy financier, an economist, and a marketing guru all at once. For many family operations, especially older farmers or those with limited resources, the future is clear. Shut down, sell out, or be swallowed. And that's exactly what's happening. Consolidation is accelerating. Small farms are vanishing, and in their place are sprawling corporate operations with access to capital, technology, and legal teams. The rich get richer, and the rest vanish, sometimes without even a sale notice. While the media fixates on inflation and consumer prices at the grocery store, the root cause is ignored: the destruction of small-scale, local food production. When independent farms disappear, so does the flexibility and resilience of the food system. Corporate agriculture may be more efficient on paper, but it's also more fragile, tied to global supply chains, centralized processing, and shareholder demands. What does this mean for the average American? Fewer choices, higher prices, and a food system that's more vulnerable to disruption. And for farmers, it means something even more tragic: the erosion of a way of life that has defined America for generations. The numbers are in, and they tell a story not just of collapse, but of abandonment. If numbers reveal the damage, politics explain the cause. For many farmers, the most bitter pill wasn't the financial devastation. It was the sense of deep betrayal by leaders they trusted. They had cast their ballots for protection, for prosperity, for a return to American greatness. What they got instead was a front row seat to their own demise. During the 2016 and 2020 campaigns, Donald Trump positioned himself as the champion of the forgotten man. His speeches in rural counties drew massive crowds. He spoke the language of small towns, promising to restore jobs, fight globalism, and give power back to the people. For farmers who had endured years of economic hardship under both Republican and Democratic administrations, this message was electrifying. Finally, someone who understood their struggle. But as policies took shape, the truth became painfully clear. The very communities that had delivered overwhelming margins, sometimes over 80% of electoral support, found themselves in the crosshairs of economic devastation. And the tools of that devastation? Not foreign tariffs or weather events, but policy decisions made by the very administration they helped put in power. It wasn't just rhetoric. The USDA, once a lifeline for struggling farmers, began to look very different. Support programs were quietly dismantled. Emergency grants were frozen. Long-standing rural development projects were halted midstream. And all of it happened without hearings, without town halls, without warning. One day, a farm had a contract. The next day, it didn't. The betrayal felt personal. Generations of families that had worked the same land for over a century were now on the brink, not because of drought or disease, but because of bureaucratic abandonment. Many farmers began to question whether their support had been manipulated for political gain. The policies they now faced seemed designed not to help them, but to remove them from the equation entirely. The emotional toll was immense. What had once been a proud community, defined by hard work, self-reliance, and faith in the American dream, was now fractured. Conversations in town diners shifted from hopeful speculation to bitter realization. Farmers weren't just losing income. They were losing trust, identity, and purpose. And as the pain spread, so did political disillusionment. Strategists who had once celebrated rural America as the cornerstone of a new conservative coalition now seemed to be rewriting the rules, favoring corporate interests, international trade alliances, and short-term political victories. Rural voters, once courted and flattered, now found themselves ignored, scapegoated, or even mocked. But the betrayal didn't just come from the federal government. State governments, dependent on large agribusiness lobbying, often supported legislation that made things worse. Tax policies favored consolidation. Environmental regulations, though well-meaning, were rolled out without support or transition plans for small farmers. Every level of government seemed out of touch. The result? A political awakening. Not necessarily a shift in party, but a shift in perception. The myth of political salvation was shattered. Farmers began to realize that no single party or leader would rescue them. The system itself was broken, and they had to survive it on their own. Rural America's support wasn't just transactional, it was heartfelt. And when that trust was betrayed, the damage went far beyond economics. It was spiritual, cultural, identity shattering. And that sense of abandonment set the stage for a different kind of devastation, one that came not from policy, but from profit. In rural America, few names carry as much weight as John Deere. The green and yellow logo isn't just a brand, it's a badge of honor. It represents quality, tradition, and American craftsmanship. For generations, farmers paid top dollar for Deere equipment, not just because it worked, but because it meant something. It meant supporting American workers. It meant believing in domestic manufacturing. It meant pride. That's why John Deere's decision to shift major manufacturing operations to Mexico wasn't just an economic move. It was a gut punch to the heart of farming culture. During one of the most difficult economic moments in modern agricultural history, the company that had always stood shoulder to shoulder with farmers chose profits over partnership. By relocating cab assembly lines and other operations south of the border, John Deere signaled a strategic pivot: cost savings over loyalty. The logic from a corporate perspective was clear. Mexico offers cheaper labor, favorable tax structures, and easier access to global supply chains. By cutting operational costs, Deere could improve its competitiveness in emerging markets. On paper, it made perfect sense. But on the ground, the consequences were catastrophic. Small towns that had grown around John Deere plants suddenly faced unemployment spikes. The local diner lost its lunch crowd. The hardware store saw sales dry up. The ripple effects were enormous and deeply personal. Each job lost wasn't just a number, it was a family's future, a mortgage payment, a child's education. Farmers too felt betrayed. They had paid premium prices for American-made equipment for decades, believing they were supporting both quality and their neighbors. But now, they were asked to buy machines built overseas, often at the same or higher prices, while watching their own communities fall apart. Even more jarring was the symbolism. John Deere wasn't just another company. It was a cultural icon. Its departure felt like the ultimate abandonment, as if the very institutions rural America had built its identity on were now turning their backs. Tariffs and political pressure did little to stop the shift. Public outrage sparked brief debates in Congress and angry op-eds, but the reality was clear. The economic system no longer cared about loyalty, community, or history. It cared about margins. And behind this shift was a deeper realization. Farmers were beginning to understand that they were not customers, they were commodities. Their purchases, their loyalty, their decades of support, none of it mattered when the spreadsheets demanded change. The impact was not just economic, but psychological. When even John Deere could walk away, what else could be trusted? And while the factories moved south, another crisis was brewing in the fields. Not in the machinery or the crops, but in the hands that harvested them. If there's one subject that sparks fierce political debate in America, it's immigration. But while headlines often focus on border walls and asylum policies, a very different battle is quietly unfolding in the fields and greenhouses of American farms. At the heart of it lies a brutal paradox. Policies designed to protect American jobs are now destroying American farms. The numbers are impossible to ignore. Over 70% of all U.S. farm workers are immigrants, and a significant portion of those are undocumented. These individuals perform the backbreaking labor that powers the agricultural industry: planting, harvesting, pruning, packing. Tasks that are not only physically demanding, but seasonally sensitive. It's a reality few Americans like to confront, but without immigrant labor, much of the food on our grocery shelves simply wouldn't exist. For decades, farmers have quietly relied on this labor force to keep operations running smoothly. But recent crackdowns on immigration, combined with heightened deportation fears, have triggered a labor crisis with far-reaching consequences. Farmers in California, Arizona, and Florida, three of the nation's most productive agricultural states, are struggling to find workers. Some fields are going unharvested, others are being abandoned altogether. Entire harvests are rotting in the sun, not due to weather or pests, but because there's no one left to pick the crops. Efforts to hire American-born workers have largely failed. The reason? Most Americans simply won't do this kind of work. It's physically exhausting, often done in extreme heat, and pays just enough to barely stay afloat. Farmers have tried raising wages to attract local workers, but there's a catch. Paying more destroys their profit margins. If a farmer pays double for labor, they can't sell their produce for twice the price. Grocery store chains won't accept that, neither will consumers. So, faced with labor shortages and price pressures, farmers are being pushed into an impossible corner. They can't find enough legal labor. They can't pay for American labor, and immigration policy continues to shrink the labor pool even further. This paradox is tearing the agricultural economy apart. The very policies that claim to protect American workers are now pushing American farms out of business. It's not just the farmhands who lose their jobs, it's truck drivers, processing plant workers, packing facilities, and local businesses that support agriculture. And this labor crisis has a direct line to your dinner table. With fewer workers in the fields, supply shrinks. Shrinking supply means higher prices. It's one of the key reasons grocery bills are soaring across the country. When a box of strawberries jumps from $2.99 to $6.99, it's not just inflation, it's policy failure. But there's a deeper human story here. Many of the immigrant workers targeted by raids or policies have lived in the U.S. for decades. They've built relationships with farmers, raised children, paid taxes, and contributed to local communities. They are not statistics, they're human beings. And their removal not only devastates farms, but also unravels the social fabric of rural America. In many small towns, farmers and immigrant laborers coexist in quiet, unspoken partnerships. One provides the work, The other provides the opportunity. It's not perfect, but it has sustained the food system for years. Now, that balance is crumbling. And as it does, so too does the viability of small and mid-sized farms across the country. The immigration labor paradox reveals an uncomfortable truth. Without foreign hands, American farms cannot function. And without those farms, America's food security stands on a knife's edge. Beyond the numbers, beyond the policies, and beyond the political rhetoric, there's a more painful truth that rarely makes headlines. This collapse is not just economic. It's deeply human. It's a story of broken dreams, vanishing traditions, and entire ways of life disappearing in silence. In rural America, farming is more than an occupation. It's an identity passed down through generations like heirlooms. The land isn't just property, it's a legacy. Families remember who planted the first row of corn, who dug the first irrigation trench, who built the barn with their own hands. These aren't just business operations, they are living histories. But as the collapse of American agriculture accelerates, so does the unraveling of this identity. Farms that have been in families for 100 years are being sold off piece by piece. Tractors are auctioned. Land is leased to corporate operators. Barns rot. Silos stand empty. And in many cases, there's no one left to inherit the land, even if they wanted to. One of the most devastating aspects of the collapse is what it's doing to the next generation. Young people who once dreamed of taking over the family farm are now turning away. Why? Because what they see is debt, burnout, and a future built on financial instability. Why plant seeds when you might not be able to afford to harvest them? Why raise cattle when meat prices are controlled by processors hundreds of miles away? Many are choosing instead to leave, to move to cities, to find stable jobs, to break the cycle. And who can blame them? Farming today demands 80-hour work weeks, extreme physical labor, and endless uncertainty. For all that, many farmers still live below the poverty line. And it's not just the young who are suffering. Older farmers, those in their 60s and 70s, are facing retirement with no savings and no successors. They're being forced to sell land for pennies on the dollar just to survive. Some die with the title to their farm still in their name, unable to let go of the land even as it crushes them. The collapse of rural farming isn't just wiping out jobs, it's destroying communities. When farms shut down, schools close, churches lose congregants, small-town diners and hardware stores fold, the local post office shutters, the town dies, slowly, then all at once. And this devastation isn't confined to statistics. It plays out in tears around kitchen tables, in empty pews, in foreclosure signs, staked into dirt roads. It's an entire way of life, bleeding out while the rest of the country looks away. Some will argue this is just progress, that modern economies evolve. But farming isn't like coal or retail. You can't offshore a cornfield. You can't replace soil with software. Agriculture is grounded in place and tradition. And once those are gone, they don't come back. What's being lost isn't just productivity, it's human meaning, a connection to the land, to heritage, to hard-won wisdom passed down through generations. It's the sense that you are part of something larger, rooted and resilient. That's what's at stake. The collapse isn't just destroying livelihoods, it's destroying the soul of rural America. As if economic pressure and political betrayal weren't enough, there's another force sweeping across American farms with breathtaking speed: automation. Technology once promised to make farming easier, safer, and more productive. Now, for many, it feels more like an eviction notice. The rise of autonomous tractors, robotic harvesters, and artificial intelligence systems is rewriting the rulebook of agriculture. No longer are fields plowed by human hands or guided by intuition built over generations. Instead, machines equipped with GPS, LiDAR, and advanced sensors are taking the reins, literally. John Deere's newest autonomous tractor is the poster child for this revolution. It can drive itself, plant seeds, spray crops, and analyze soil, all without a farmer in the cab. These machines operate 24/7 with astonishing precision. They're more efficient than any human team, require no breaks, and never get tired. Sounds like a miracle, right? Not for everyone. The problem is access. These machines cost upwards of $1 million, well beyond the reach of the average family farm. Large corporate operations can afford them without blinking, but for smaller farms, the dream of automation is a fantasy. They're being left behind in a technological arms race they never agreed to enter. This isn't just a gap, it's a chasm. Wealthy farms gain more productivity, more profit, and more market share. Small farms fall further behind, unable to compete on cost, efficiency, or scale. The divide becomes permanent. What's worse, many tech companies pushing these innovations have no roots in agriculture. They're based in Silicon Valley, more interested in data and machine learning than soil and rain cycles. The tools they build are powerful, but they often ignore the human realities of farming. And they risk severing the ancient bond between people and land. For generations, farming was as much art as science. Farmers learned to read the sky, the soil, the plants. They developed intuition that couldn't be taught in a classroom. But now, that knowledge is being replaced by code. And with it, the very role of the farmer is being redefined. From cultivator to technician, from steward to systems manager. Some farmers are adapting. They're using drones to scout crops, software to track yields, and AI to optimize irrigation. But these tools require training, time, and investment, resources many struggling operations don't have. For every farmer embracing innovation, another is being forced out by it. The automation wave is also accelerating consolidation. When machines can do the work of 10 people, there's less need for small farms. Corporate operations, already well-funded and well-connected, snap up distressed land and expand their reach. Farming becomes centralized, industrialized, and increasingly detached from local communities. And there's a cultural cost. The stories of the land, the grandfather who planted the first orchard, the mother who ran the books, the son who fixed the broken combine, are being replaced by algorithms and machine logs. The soul of farming is being compressed into a data stream. Automation isn't evil. But in the current system, it's creating winners and losers. And the losers are often the very people who built American agriculture from the ground up. The machines are here. The question is, will they save farming or finish it off? As American farmers battle rising costs, collapsing prices, labor shortages, and corporate betrayal, a new force has risen across the Pacific, a force that once relied on America's agricultural might, but now threatens to surpass it. That force is China. For decades, China was one of the world's largest importers of U.S. agricultural products. Soybeans, wheat, corn, and pork were shipped overseas in massive volumes. American farmers were reassured again and again, don't worry, China needs us. But today, that narrative has flipped. China no longer just needs American farms. It's now competing with them, and in some cases, beating them. Let's start with agricultural equipment. Chinese manufacturers like Zoomlion and YTO Group have begun producing tractors, harvesters, and irrigation systems at half the price of American brands. While these machines may lack the premium features of a John Deere, they work, and for a struggling farmer facing tight margins, that price difference is impossible to ignore. Across Africa, South America, and even parts of Eastern Europe, Chinese farm equipment is displacing U.S.-made product at alarming rates. But China's ambitions don't end with hardware. The nation has been rapidly achieving food self-sufficiency, investing billions in agricultural R&D, smart farming technologies, and infrastructure. Through massive state-led initiatives, China has not only cut its dependence on American food, it's building the capacity to export food at scale. This shift is seismic. For years, American farmers were told that a growing global population, especially in Asia, would ensure long-term demand. China's pivot toward independence and export capacity shatters that assumption. The market American agriculture was built around is shrinking before their eyes. And China's moves are strategic. They're acquiring farmland in Africa and Latin America, investing in vertical farming, and deploying AI-driven systems at scale. They're not just growing more, they're doing it faster, cheaper, and with fewer people. It's industrial agriculture on a global scale, backed by the full force of the Chinese state. Meanwhile, U.S. farmers are left navigating a fractured system with minimal support. They face equipment costs that are skyrocketing, trade deals that shift with political winds, and supply chains that stretch across unstable global markets. When they try to compete internationally, they find themselves up against Chinese firms supported by subsidized capital and state protection. Even on American soil, China's influence is growing. Chinese companies have quietly purchased U.S. farmland and processing facilities, raising national security concerns and economic red flags. Critics argue these acquisitions give China control over parts of America's food supply chain, a risk that few policymakers seem ready to confront. For farmers already on the edge, this global competition is a death blow. They were told they were feeding the world. Now they can't even feed themselves. The geopolitical implications are staggering. Food is power. Whoever controls food production controls not just trade, but diplomacy, stability, and influence. China understands this. America, it seems, has forgotten. This is no longer just a question of subsidies or supply chains. It's a fight for dominance over global agriculture. And if the U.S. continues to let its family farms fail while foreign powers expand their reach, it may soon find itself dependent on the very nations it once supplied. The battlefield has gone global, and America is falling behind. America's farms are standing at a crossroads, one shaped by broken promises, economic devastation, vanishing labor, technological upheaval, and a global race for dominance. What was once the beating heart of American identity is now being fractured by forces far beyond the soil. We've seen how political betrayal gutted rural communities. We've seen how corporate giants abandoned the very people who built their brands. We've seen how automation created winners and left everyone else behind. And we've seen how foreign powers, especially China, are capitalizing on America's hesitation. But amid all this chaos, we've also seen sparks of resilience, innovation, reinvention, farmers who refuse to quit, who refuse to sell out, who find new ways forward, not because it's easy, but because survival demands it. This isn't just a story about crops or cows. It's about control, identity, and the future of what we eat, how we live, and who holds the power to decide. The next decade will determine whether America remains a land of independent family farms or a nation fully surrendered to industrial control and foreign interests. The clock is ticking. So now, we ask you, will America fight for its farmers or forget them? Will you? Once again, thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of this, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Agree, disagree, or something in between. I'd love to hear it.